Dan Burisch is debriefed regarding his early university education at SUNY. In the debriefing, he goes into great depth regarding the scientific procedures employed to remedy the extraterrestrial's malady called peripheral neuropathy. Also, Dan describes in great detail the protocols that were in place for navigating the biocontainment area in Area 51S4 at Papoose Mountain, 10 miles south of Groom Lake proper. He also mentions Bob Lazar's participation in the same facility where Dan worked for over 10 years. In order to give the audience a point of reference of what a biocontainment facility is like, he refers to several popular movies. The main one is Dustin Hoffman's excellent portrayal of a biowarfare expert in the movie Outbreak. Therefore, we are showing these clips with the acknowledgement of Warner Brothers Home Video. Secret government-sanctioned debriefing of Dan Burisch, Ph.D., by his scientific assistant, Marcia McDowell.
Well, tonight is an interesting kind of a night because we're going to start to have a chat about your last bit of time at SUNY.
Right.
And what exactly you were learning and how it applied to your work at Area 51S4 and ultimately your work with the J-Rod.
Very fine. Before we get going, I think it's appropriate history-wise to give a very short reading from the Brookings Institution statement. And I hope to God that they were wrong. They wrote so many years ago, anthropological files contain many examples of societies sure of their place in the universe, which have disintegrated when they had to associate with previously unfamiliar societies espousing different ideas and different life ways. Others that survived such an experience usually did so by paying the price of changes in values and attitudes and behavior. I hope to God that they were wrong as we plow ever forward in the effort for disclosure, that the vast majority of the human race is able to accept what they're learning concerning not only their future but also their present conditions, and to carry forward not harmed by those notions but enriched by the knowledge that we do go on and that there are others. And with that, I think we should probably move into what we're here for.
All right. So we're going to start off and talk a little bit about your experiences when you were earning your PhD.
Okay, I'll put us in the middle 1989 time frame here, when in fact I was working for the Department of Parole and Probation. I was also in between dealing with several professors from the State University of New York at Stony Brook. Among those, of course, was Bill, who was my faculty advisor. Now, at that time, I'm not certain whether or not Bill was on permanently with the faculty or not, as he would never meet me in an office. However, I was taken to another office, an office of a certain Harv, who at the time was the director of cellular and developmental biology, which of course was the title of the doctorate as it was granted at the end of 1989. I worked with two different Eugenes, one of which was dealing with slime molds at the time, the other was dealing with glycoproteins, and in Irwin, a Sanford, Emmanuel, and then of course Bill and Harv. These guys ended up being my dissertation committee for oral dissertation and defense, which was ultimately carried out here in Las Vegas at the kind assistance from Dodie, my mom.
This is the oral defense of your dissertation that Dodie arranged to have the professors billeted here in Vegas and fed and
Yes.
essentially given decent accommodations prior to
Yes,
your dissertation?
it was an arrangement between the Hilton Hotel and the Sahara. Whereas in the Hilton is where they were kept or roomed, and at the Sahara is where, in the Space Center, is where the actual oral defense was carried out. It took approximately 3.5 to 4 hours.
The Space Center, you might want to clarify, because I think the Sahara, for people who don't know, the Space Center isn't what they might think it is.
I don't know. It may not even be there anymore. They've changed the arrangements for the Sahara so much since those days. It may not even be there. But there was a large meeting room, convention meeting space facility, which was up on the second floor of the Sahara at the time that this was going on. It was the farthest east portion of the Sahara, and led out in the backside of it to the loading dock facilities. So it was a large loading, unloading area as well as convention space.
And it was just nicknamed the Space Center.
Right. I'm not sure if it was named that officially or if it was nicknamed. It was. We always called it the Space Center anyway when I was frequenting there. I was required to subsume a couple different texts. And was also required to be certified in several modules, most of which were sent here to Las Vegas, and I carried out the examinations over at the Community College of Southern Nevada, which was the
Clark County
Community College
at the time. Yeah.
Yep. And the rest were actually taken at the State University of New York in Stony Brook, some of which were done inside of the Mendelssohn Library. But more often, I would take these certification tests actually outside in the G-Quad. I had 2 people with me that was under heavy guard, being escorted in and out of there, and was not allowed to speak with the rest of the students, or as any normal student would.
Okay. So these people that were guarding you, they went with you everywhere, and they essentially were a sort of blockade against anybody who might approach you?
Yes. Yes. In fact, if another student, for any reason, would walk up and try to say anything, there was a couple of those instances. One of the individuals would actually walk between myself and the student and answer the person's question. So I would never actually encounter them. The only student that I encountered, his first name was Quang, and he was in the Chapin Apartments down in the southeast portion of the campus when I had to stay there overnight on just a couple of occasions. I was only there like 7 or 9 times, and that was it.
When you say you were taking an exam there, or were you proctored? It was a proctored exam where you were given 2 hours to complete.
Yes, and one of the individuals, 4 named individuals, were actually present with the security staff that was brought with me. And while Quang, the one student that was there at the time, he was present during a couple of them, and in fact, one of the professors looked at him and kind of gave him a nod. So I don't know where he's gone or what he's done or anything like that, but they'd give him a nod, and he proctored one of the exams right inside one of the dorm rooms.
Okay.
In the Chapin Apartments, but I was not carried as a normal student at SUNY, and there seemed to have been an overall purpose, a very focused purpose to my being there, and the focused purpose was actually dealing with glycoproteins. Now later on, antifreeze proteins and antifreeze glycoproteins become an important theme having to do with the J-rod and the particular pathology with which we struggled.
Now, the book that you had to subsume, was this about glycoproteins?
Yes, it was called The Biochemistry of Glycoproteins and Proteoglycans, and it was authored by Bill.
So one of your professors actually wrote the book
Yes.
that you had to absorb and become intimately familiar with.
Yes.
And he was part and parcel of the group that was authorized to train you.
He seemed to be the leader of the group who was authorized to train me, but yet his status didn't seem very official around there during the time of my study there. It was almost as if he was brought in from elsewhere, and I'm not certain where he worked prior to SUNY. but it was like he was brought in from somewhere else and to facilitate the training, and with a particular focus and a particular regimen for the training.
Could you take a second and could you explain exactly what a glycoprotein is?
Sure. A glycoprotein is basically a carbohydrate hooked to a protein. Proteoglycan is usually a mucopolysaccharide which is bound to a protein chain. And they are found often in extracellular matrices, and they are part and parcel to some carbohydrate metabolism. Glycoproteins, specific varieties of glycoproteins are called antifreeze glycoproteins, and what they actually do is they prevent, by disallowing formation of ice crystals. So you might find antifreeze glycoproteins naturally in fish, for instance, in Arctic waters. They prevent a freezing. And it just so happens that the antifreeze glycoproteins, there were antifreeze proteins and antifreeze glycoproteins, were also involved in the metabolism and the pathology of the J-rod. What these guys did is they made sure that I was, in fact, certified and mastered and was able to theorize concerning the chemistry of glycoproteins and proteoglycans.
These things actually floated around in a bloodstream, and they created an ability of an organism to not freeze.
Well, there's some that inhabit blood in a closed vascular system, but moreover, these are the sorts of things that you would find bathing tissues, so that when exposed to cold, so that they would not freeze. They prevent the lattice formation for ice crystals. All right. They certified me in that. They certified me in continuous and synchronized growth of cultures. I was then retrained. Of course, I was trained by Zane originally on a transmission electron microscope during the 70s when I was working at, learning from the folks at the LA Micro Society. But they had 2 transmission electron microscopes at the time and 1 scanning electron microscope, and I was certified in those. And I was also...
This was at SUNY?
Yes. Yes. Years before, I was taught how to use the transmission electron scope by Zane at UCLA. And this was during some field trips that we took, and a couple extra trips which were facilitated by the LA Micro Society. I was brought through, though, at SUNY, the upper level biochemistry having to do with Haworth projections, chair formations, Fisher projections, so that I could move fairly easily between these types of projections involving biochemistry. And I had wondered at the time why they were taking so much time. Well, later on at S4, we had VRML systems where we could actually move in 3 dimensions with virtual reality the glycoproteins in an effort to attempt to ameliorate the condition of the J-rod. Of course, we weren't wholly successful. The antifreeze glycoproteins that we worked on were alanine, threonine, alanine tripeptides, and that was a disaccharide. They had a disaccharide which was attached to a threonyl residue. Residues are basically things that are left behind on substrates that usually aren't usable. Now there's some residue chemistry which is going on nowadays that may turn that around a little bit, and in fact the residue chemistry involving montmorillonite and our research with the Lotus. Yeah. They also had me certified in dealing with detection chemistry, and the detection chemistry that we were working on was immunoelectrophoresis, radioimmune precipitation. We worked affinity chromatography, and then the blotting systems like Western, Northern, and Southern blotting.
It would probably be a good idea if we just went over each of these types of systems. Really just kind of briefly, just give an idea what you're talking about.
Okay, these are our biochemical systems, biochemical testing techniques, which allow a person to detect a particular type of protein or protein interactions. In affinity chromatography, for instance, we had an immunoabsorbent inside of a container, and on that immunoabsorbent would be attached a particular form of antigen. this particular form of antigen would be specifically targeted to what we were trying to pull out of the chemical we were testing. So then we would do a pour of that chemical through this tube, if you will, that had the immunoabsorbent with the antigen on it. And that antigen would then be selectively attached by the particular type of, and we were looking at immunoglobulins at the time, the particular type of antibody that we had. And the particular type that we were specifically looking for, and the particular type that these guys actually trained me for, was IgA, immunoglobulin A, which is almost counterintuitive because IgM is that immunoglobulin which is found in higher fractions in a normal human biochemistry, normal human immune system. But they were targeting specifically for IgA. And this is kind of why I'm saying it's counterintuitive, not just because of the lack of the IgA, the lesser percentage, lesser ratio, lesser fraction of it that you would find in a human being, but it was in fact IgA that became the immunoglobulin of interest having to do with the J-rod. And you'd say, well, that's not counterintuitive. They focused on that. Yes, but when I got to S4 and when we were actually working on the J-rod, these guys weren't thinking about IgA. Now, no, they weren't lying to me or anything like that at the time, because these guys were in the middle. The AQJR1 program was in the middle, dealing with the genome of the J-rod and how there were translocations involving the genome and the reduction of the chromosomes. This
was the original team that was there when you got there.
Well, it was the extant team which was there. There were a couple prior to that, but we never learned much about them.
But the team that was actually in place when you got there was working on genomic considerations.
Yes, they were. And when we came in, and Steve was looking to me for some ideas, I suggested to kind of turn it upside down, but we'll get there. Immunoelectrophoresis is a method that we use to separating these antibodies, these immunoglobulins, by virtue of a charge. And depending upon, we would run it from a negative to a positively charged side, and the immunoglobulins would move along and then become selectively attracted to particular targets and antisera that we would put along the side of the runners, basically, their little tracks. Radioimmune precipitation is a method that we used when Western blotting would fail. You'd say, well, what the heck is Western blotting? Western blotting is a method whereby you can run what's called an SDS page system, a sodium dodecyl sulfate polyacrylamide gel electrophoresis system. And the purpose of that is to identify the abundance or the amount of buildup of protein. Now, when you are doing this and you run a page system electrophoresis and add a nitrocellulose bed in there, and then ultimately do autoradiography to tell where the positions, little bands are on the proteins, depending upon weight and time of travel and charge. But this wouldn't always work, and the reason why it wouldn't always work for us is that I'm kind of jumping forward to S4 here, but some of the proteins that we were dealing with would degrade too quickly. And so the radioimmune precipitation test would be used instead. Now, I was certified for doing both of these at SUNY, and they had some earlier methods, but we put little higher class methods having to do with the dialyzing and the affinity chromatography and things like that. But in any case, we would label using a radionuclide of sulfur in the methionine, I believe we used, and actually produced targets inside of the cell, depending upon protein amounts that we were looking for. The northern and southern blotting, this was actually named after, I believe, a person called Southern.
Yeah, I know.
But That's a name game that went on in
Then there was
biochemistry.
the Eastern and Western.
Right. Well, we have the Western blots. The Western blot was that low quality. The radioimmune precipitation that we worked with was able to detect as well protein-protein interactions and also give us an idea of the rate of protein synthesis. And that becomes extremely important, especially when you're targeting to reduce protein synthesis by virtue of reducing the expression of a particular gene, and it becomes important on that level. But the northern and southern blotting has to do with detection of RNA and DNA. And what we would do is run an STS page somewhere similar to the Western blotting, and then do specific targeting of the DNA and the RNA present. And we could actually get very good subfractions that could be later on PCR'd or reverse PCR'd, so that we could look at actual sequencing of the DNA. So that gives you an idea, some of the fun stuff that we were dealing with.
This was going on while you were at your periodic visits to SUNY, and the rest of the stuff was being sent here in module form.
Yes.
And you were doing that concurrently while you were working at P&P.
Yes. Let me pull us back a little bit to give us a little timeline here, 1988, 1989, 1990, when things started really picking up. Of course, when I say 1988 is right after 1987. Well, 1987, of course, I was involved with the seminary.
Oh, yeah, right, okay.
And so what happened is they basically stopped contacting me during the late 86, start of 1987, and my life moved on, as I've already debriefed over, but my life moved on, and I decided to go to the seminary. And then I was recontacted during the actual application process for the seminary. In fact, when I was nearing the end of the application process. And so what they did is they said, well, yeah, it's probably a good idea. Go get right with God.
You're going that way anyway, go.
Right. So I guess I did, I don't know, I guess I did get right with God, but ultimately the direction for my life had changed and I wasn't going to remain in the seminary. In any case, 1989 rolled along, and I am now a journeyman level parole and probation officer. And right around mid-1989, I ran into the bank robber situation, Mr. Harrell,
where you chased him down.
Chased him down, got him arrested, and was near promoted immediately after that into court services. Well, this was the perfect way for me to finish up the majority of my modules, because in court services, I had an own closed-off office, not a cubicle like over on Bonanza at the AA Campos building, but I was now to the south of there, inside downtown Las Vegas at the Phoenix building, and it was a real office environment.
So you could close your door, and you could, when you had a little spare time,
and ask the officers that worked in there. My door was almost always closed.
Aha.
So what I was doing is getting in early in the morning and listening to All Things Considered on KMPR, having a nice cup of coffee, and would then go pull the files that I had for the day. And I was doing 30, 35 PSIs a month. But I had my method down pat, where I could put out my scope requests and FBI and III requests and all of that business, and then have a few hours for the rest of the morning. So what I would do is I would set my interviews for the afternoons. I would be in there by about 7:15, 7:30 in the morning. I would then work until about noon on the modules.
Okay.
And then from there, from noon until approximately 4:30, I would have noon to 2 o'clock my interviews. Then from 2 o'clock to 4:30, I would dictate on the PSIs. So I had a real system set up for myself to get this done. And yes, I was working my back off on it, but we got it done. Now, at the same time, I was being introduced for the first time to Groom Lake in 1989. And I was actually flown into Groom Lake and brought to two different levels we spoke with Mark about what the first level looked like, and several times during the testing with the otoscope on that first level down, after that several testing, I was brought down one more level to a lab called Lab 8B. And Lab 8B was basically a biocontainment facility, a cabinet laboratory for biological warfare.
You might want to explain cabinet lab.
Okay, it's a sealed, pressurized system, and in the environs, the milieu that we're talking about here, this was a totally separated laboratory for containment of infectious pathological agents for which there are no known cures. So we were required to be inside of positive pressurized total encapsulated suits. Kind of like the thing that you would see on some popular movies like Outbreak or the Andromeda Strain. This laboratory was built specifically for biological warfare applications. The neat thing about this laboratory had nothing to do with the laboratory, though. The neat thing about the trip down there was the fact that when the movement from the elevator area to the laboratory was a large spanning walkway, not that different from what you saw to the cabinet lab in the movie Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman. But this thing was actually set off inside of a cavern. And there was an area to the north, I believe it was, of where this laboratory was located, that had a huge elevator system, almost like the sort of elevators that you would find on a flat top, on a naval aircraft carrier.
Essentially the whole moving.
Right. And I watched this brought down a couple times, and there were in fact weapons platforms and aircraft on it that would be moved farther down into the cavern. So they actually have underground working areas up at Groom. So the report that there are caverns there are very accurate. The report that there are caverns there with little EBEs running around is it's nonsense. It's fallacious. It's nonsense. Now in 1990, I also had my first trip to S4.
Okay.
Oh boy. Now during this time, I was also penning with Christopher LaPierre an automated biological laboratory experiment for NASA, right, which B.I. Edelson actually had written me a letter and approved out of NASA for the use of Euglena viridis in the automated biological laboratory environment.
Oh, exactly.
And I received a nice letter from them saying that they anticipated its usefulness. So, in 1990, going back to 1990, I was officially told that I was assigned to the DIA, Defense Intelligence, which mattered not to me because I was still just doing the microbiology. I've been assigned to the DIA, I've been assigned to the United States Navy, the United States Marine Corps. I think for a while they assigned me, I don't know, I mean they could have said I was part of the Roman Navy and it would have been fine with me. Because I just did what I did. I did what I was trained to do, and that's work on bugs, ultimately for them, for the military, and I did what I was trained to do, being a microbiologist in concert with the AQJR program. In 1990, though, I was first shown and given some exposure to the Galileo bays at S4, to the Looking Glass and to Sidekick. Now, if you want to think, they first introduced me to Galileo, Looking Glass, Sidekick. And at that time, Sidekick was still up on the first floor in back of the avionics and the propulsion lab. Just next to the nine bays where the discs and planforms set. During the entire 3.5 or 4 precious months that Mr. Lazar, precious little months that he was there, he was shown approximately the same thing. Now, I was shown this for nearly a year. that it was Galileo and Sidekick, and we're not going to get into Sidekick and for the weapons R&D issues, and Looking Glass. That's all I knew really existed at that facility as well, because in between when they needed me to do biological work, I simply wasn't taken to S4. I remained at Groom 2 floors down and was doing the biological testing work at Groom. Now meanwhile, they're telling me that the S4 facility is called Paiute Mesa.
Paiute Mesa.
Right. And I had no clue that it was even called Papoose. I had no previous experience with this whatsoever.
So, okay, we're at 1990.
We're in 1990. I'm being introduced to the S4 facility, not by chopper, but I was being taken there on the Cannonball, which was the road, the van. Yeah. We nicknamed the Cannonball Express. It was Cannonball, all right. The drivers that would drive this thing would drive a little bit too fast, and it was like sliding along on shifting clay plates.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever driven on a washed out road that's a little bit like a washboard.
Yeah, that's what it was.
And if you drive quick enough, you superplane over the top of the washboard things. Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Initially, I was in the same briefing room in S4 that Bob talked about, in the hall past security, past the BSS security, and on the right-hand side. And what they would do is initially, they wouldn't have me get cleaned in the RN's office, but I would still have to strip down. And that's one thing that Mark was mentioning. You weren't here at the time. I don't think that the interview was going on. He said, it's one thing he just didn't buy about Bob's story was the fact that Bob said that he wore his own clothing and all of that business.
You can't wear your own clothing up there.
You don't.
No.
Now, perhaps his dealing with Ian up there, and I know the guy's name. His name Dennis Mariani was an anagram for the guy's real name. His name was Ian, and he was the head of the propulsion laboratory up there. Just barely met the dude, and that was it. Hi, bye. Oh, this is the head of the propulsion lab. Hello, and move on. Perhaps he let him in that way, but the scientists don't run the show up there. The security does, and they are working, of course, at behest of Majestic to get the job done. And the rule was disrobe and get into your jumpers there in the RN's office, and or if the guys from security liked you enough, they'd let you go down to the bathroom first, which is eventually what I did, so I could get my booties, because the booties were actually stored inside the restroom, so I wouldn't have to walk barefoot from the RN's office down to the restroom. The atmosphere inside of there is extremely oppressive for anybody just starting. There were people around with very small yet very poignant automatic weapons. They were dressed all in black. They had black berets on, and they were known up there as the Black Seals. And I'm not certain what military affiliation they have, aside from probably with the United States Navy. But that's all I know, and I know that they had very, very little sense of humor. We were told, very directly when we would get out from either the bus or from the chopper. In either case, that security from Groom would never get off with us. There would not be 1 foot that would be set down on the ultimately what I found out was a Papoose facility. Not 1 foot on the ground by those people out there, because the security out there ran the show, and never the twain shall cross. So they were not allowed to even step outside of the bus. The security up there was extremely oppressive. It was extremely omnipresent. There were several per floor in the hallways, at various locations in the hallways. And you had to really get to know them to be able to get your booties first. And so I schmoozed as quickly as possible, but it still took several months before they would allow me several months of distinct trips in and out of there, not constant staying there, before they would allow me to go get my booties first. I mean, it sounds like a minor thing, but those floors are cold. Yeah. They are basically cement floors up there, and the statement that you would learn, part of the enculturation up there was called walking the line. You were told that you needed to walk the line to your various locations, and you were told not to, step off from that line too far or go away from it. And in fact, the SEALs, when they changed places up there, they had a changing of guard, if you will, and the times that I got a chance to see them with my H badge, that they would actually walk down this line and almost look like the soldiers that would walk in honor at the Tomb of the Unknowns. They were extremely smooth in their gait, and extremely professional. And when they would change out with each other, they would come walk up with each other, and then they would do a turnabout, and then the other person would change out that way. Extremely fluidic, extremely professional men working there. I had a great admiration for the professionalism of the security up there, and great fear of them as well. Because I knew, and they knew I knew, that if I were to step too far out of bounds, that they would shoot me. They kept it extremely cool in the facility, which worked well for me because I like a cool type of an environment. The walls and the floor were basically a cement gray. However, on the walls, approximately waist height, was a large orange stripe. I was never told why they put an orange stripe on there, but it was a god-awful looking thing. The bays were labeled, the Galileo bays, with a number in a red circle. It was like a stamp placed on the walls, 4-1, a 4-1A, 1B, having to do with the forward areas where the avionics were worked on. I'm wondering if Bill Uhouse was actually down in there, because if so, his son and I will have some direct correspondence with, one-for-one agreement with what he saw. And that's something that was peculiar. In Bob Lazar's description of the bays, he never mentioned the diagnostic working area, which actually goes down and out under and actually outside of where the preformed, prefab type hangar doors were on the side of the mountain. It actually goes under that area, in front and under. So if you're standing in front of S4, you're standing on the top of the 4-1A diagnostic area. Yeah, and that wasn't in any of his drawings. Maybe it's a holdback to find legit persons, or. Well, ufologists, from what I understand, do that all the time anyway. They hold back a certain amount of information that would then be confirmed by another real experiencer in a particular laboratory. But during this time, I was working over at Groom and going through the testing and going through then theoretical process, and I knew that it was called AQJR, Aquarius JR, but I didn't know what a JR meant. So I thought it was like junior, like Carl's Jr., Aquarius Jr. I didn't know. I didn't have any idea. And we were looking at this point, some of these anomalous cells, which ended up being these microglial cells that in 1994, before I actually was in with the J-Rod, I did that short debriefing where the gentleman came out and said that a gun was on me and all of this business, and I looked like a scared rat during the whole thing.
He started out the debriefing saying that it was locked and loaded.
Right, and I think part of that debriefing is actually leaked out to the public because a short snippet of it happened on the Knapp interview.
Well, then it has been leaked out.
Yeah, everybody's probably wondering why I look like a scared rat. Well, I've got the audio from the first few seconds of it where I'm actually told about this weapon that he locks and loads in front of me.
Well, you can hear him.
I thought he
does that.
Because Deborah was there with me, I thought if I said the wrong thing at any minute, he might shoot me. Why else was he bringing out, just for bravado, bringing out a fast repeating arm, in front of me, a long rifle in front of me, and cocking it in front of me? It scared the hell out of me. And it would scare the hell out of me today. But During this time, I had no idea that the Papoose dry lake bed was even there. They had the screens up, and this is something that I was asked subsequently during the early portion of the debriefing. Well, could you see Papoose Lake from there? And I answered honestly, no. Well, the reason why I couldn't is that they had the tarpaulin fences, which were up on a little rise, little berm rise, just outside of the driving area and the little pull-out bays for the Galileo bays, almost like a parking spaces set there. So I couldn't even see the dry lake bed from there. So my orientation was totally messed up. Plus, then they kept in over the top of the numbers. They had caps over the numbers, so I didn't know how many floors the facility was. They called it Paiute facility, not even Papoose facility. And I guess you had to be trusted to a certain level before
they would really open up.
Tell you where you were and what the place was actually called, even. So the name of the facility was even hid for me for a few years. I had absolutely no clue. It was not until the end of 1993, by my recollection, by the reports from up there, the documents read, at the start of 1994, I was brought to the viewing gallery above the 4-5 viewing gallery, the suite. And that's not what my recollection is, though. My recollection is correct. So I don't know why there's a problem with the documents up there. And I can tell you why my recollection is correct. During this same time, I had broken off at the end of 1993 from my mom and dad. There became a problem involving between them, Deborah, and the new baby that was on the way and then subsequently arriving. Well, she brought me a package to the time office area where I was sitting doing basically nothing, and she stared at me and said, "You're not Danny. You're not Danny," because at that first time, it was the first time ever I was shaved bald. Straight razored bald. And the reason why I was shaved bald was so I could fit into the suit with the suit ring.
Now this was in late 1990?
This was late 1993.
Now, had you already been fitted into the suit at that point?
No, I was being fitted at that point.
You were being fitted at that point?
I was being fitted.
Okay.
Because the suits which were contained down in the floor level were different than the positive pressure total encapsulation suits that we used in the pretend biocontainment level 4 and level 3. Mm-hmm. The containment areas that they had ultimately, when I was brought down to those areas, went from biological containment 1 all the way to biological containment 4. Technically, it's supposed to be a totally separate cabinet laboratory, but they actually had the name Pretend over the decon facility at the back of the laboratory. A sign, a joke. It said, pretend you're leaving this facility now, instead of just walking around the corner into another lab. It's a weird sense of humor up there, like the white rabbit above the looking glass facility.
It's strange, yes.
Cooking for Nevada above the food storage area.
Storage area and this food service. It's kind of strange.
And they actually had the boxes put off where if you look at the room, it actually looked like a state of Nevada. They had this thing. It's just weird rituals that go on in these SAP facilities that you wouldn't think would happen. But I don't know. Maybe it's insanity under the pressure of the security.
Well, it's something because it has to be, or people would just kind of they would just lose it, because without that little bit of humor under the pressure, I think they would.
It's unbearable, or nearly unbearable sometimes, and that's why when we were working inside of it was a BL3 plus cabinet lab, but we called it BL4. We would be plugged in. We would unplug from our and plug into the ones up above. Before you could enter into the laboratory, and let me just give you a little bit of spec here. From 3 to 4, they had a lift door. The door would not slide from side to side. It would go up and down into the floor, and then you could walk into it, and it would close up in back of you. It was easier to detect any leakage problem. That's what the rationale that I was told was used, because gravity would normally pull something downward, whereas gravity would not pull it from side to side, and there could be a very small pressure leak. in there. And because this was a positive pressurized laboratory, they would bring us into an antechamber, drop the one, we would then enter into the antechamber, it would raise, and then the second one would drop, and we would enter into decon. As soon as we would enter into decon, we were already suited in this little gap area, and we were plugged in and receiving O2. Well, it was a mixture of gases. It was a compressed air. They didn't have us working with standard O2. No. It's too bad they didn't with helium, because then we could all sound like Mickey Mouses.
No.
But anyway.
So they had a standard mix.
Right, we were already plugged in before we would go and get washed off on our suits before we would step into the cabinet lab. They would actually rinse us off before we would step in, and we would go through the pans and all of that, the decon pans, for our white booties that we were wearing then. And then we would move and we would hook into the secondary system in the ceiling, test the pressure on that, and then unhook from our original one, and that would just retract. The tubes would retract. So then we would be free to move about inside of the cabinet lab. Now, there was only supposed to be 2 of us in there.
Yeah.
Oftentimes there was 4, because we would break the rules to get the job done in the amount of time that we had. We were extremely pressured in the amount of time, and it was their rationale, surveillance's rationale, that being that there's no joking going on, being that it's all productive time, there should be no problem getting the work done. So when we began joking, we would hear, please get back to business, gentlemen, over our number 1 mics. And I touched myself here because we had a belt that would go around us outside of the suit that had our communication systems, and we had a number 1 and a number 2 system. The number 2 would strictly go into the surveillance and security, and we were supposed to be working on that if there was ever an emergency. Well, if there was ever an emergency, we were going to die anyway. So it was almost a joke, but that's the way they had it set up for biological warfare, I guess, protocols, and they just carried that over for us. And that's like the blow off.
The evacuation.
Yeah, the evac ones.
Yeah.
Number 3, for God's sakes, would go to the same blow off that the incineration. The incinerator was hooked to from level 3, and so you couldn't get in the damn thing anyway because it would be too hot. But if they ever filled it with a gas and melted everything down, they had emergency blow-off vents for the pressure. If you're trying to escape, you were escaping up the same tube that the blow-off pressure would be going through. So either you were going to stay there and be melted, or be blown out like a marshmallow, a toasted marshmallow out of the blow-off tubes. You were going to die one way or the other. So. But we would joke inside of the cabinet lab and move around in there every once in a while when we had to move around each other to go from the one cab to the second cab. There were almost like vent hoods, positive pressurized, but they were glove box. And if we had to move from one to another, we would actually rotate around each other, because the 4 hookups that were in the ceiling had a rotator head on it, almost like the rotator head that you would see on a microscope with the objectives coming out. It kind of looked like that. And so we would actually have to physically and consciously rotate around each other so that we weren't crossing our tubes, our airlines. And so we would say, okay, rotate, then we would move around and say, we're a hydra, because we looked like this, like a hydra from the ceiling. And so we would walk along and do that, and every damn time they would come in and they would jump on us and say, gentlemen, enough of the jokes, please. We're a hydra. But we're a hydra now. And it was these strange little ways that we would get the pressure off with humor. However, when our hands were on something, there was never any joking going on. So if we had our hands off everything, it was almost constant. In the lower labs, now you couldn't get into the BL1 without wearing a BL2 respirator. We had bunnies and BL2 type respirators on, and whenever we were told to hold up for a moment, we had preformed benches in front of us where there were actual handprints that were preformed plastic handprints that were called our safe positions. Underneath us, where we were actually standing, we were actually on a weighing device. So we would step into our little preformed working area, and we would step onto that weighing pan. There would then be they'd say gentlemen hold, and we would stand there with our hands crossed, and this is why I still stand that way, sometimes naturally or like this. We'd have to cross our hands in front of us somehow so that our hands were occupied, yet not touching anything of any import. And they would actually get a weight on us as we were standing there. Then they would say, all right, gentlemen, hands to your safe positions, please. And then we would put our safe positions. And then the bottle washers would come in and bring in the particular equipment that we had set up, that we had scheduled in the briefing room prior to entry.
Now, there were other times that you would be putting your hands into the safe position and the surveillance cameras would be moving about you.
Yeah, the area in the front of our benches was beveled near the ceiling. So it didn't come up to a 90-degree angle at the ceiling, and it was actually beveled. And there were cameras that were both extending cameras as well as rotating cameras in that beveled box, looked like in front of us. Some of the cameras, it was kind of freaky. We joked that it was like a snail, because these cameras would come out and almost extend, it looked like the snail eyes. But it would extend out and actually rotate and take a scan of what we had in front of us, and then would extend back into the wall. These things were clearly a 1970s, late 60s, early 70s vintage product that they were still using in there. However, the other items that were hooked up, the rotating cameras, looked like something that you would find 1980s vintage, a little bit newer, so you could tell that they had done some work in the facility to upgrade the surveillance of the facility. Behind us there was a flat corrugated walking area, and then a beveled trough that would run between the lab benches. And we would actually drop our used glassware, plasticware, anything else that we wanted to get off from our benches into that trough. And then at the end of our working time, depending upon what we were dropping in there, they'd have us go to a safe position if there was any noxious chemicals or whatever, and then they would flood it through, or the bottle washers would come in with their little V-sticks, and they would actually move all of the glassware and everything out of our way. We used things once up there and once only, including the Pyrex glassware. It was once and once only. Unless something, if we're talking about storage of cultures in a Pyrex container or whatever, as long as what that particular generation or culture was maintained, of course it would be kept in the same thing. Biological containment protocols that we actually used, we moved up to bunnies immediately from 1 through 2, and then 3 and 4 was our positive pressure suits. The fourth area, the fourth biological containment area, was basically designed for exotics, and in fact the only exotics that I saw in there were in fact the J-rod tissue. And that was the problem. The problem is that we didn't know even the human genome at that time. It didn't have it sequenced as much as what we do now.
I thought it was fascinating. I love Dan's description of the SEAL teams, the Black SEAL teams, and their changing of the guard, because that's exactly the way it works. And also his descriptions of working in the lab and being monitored by whoever. And if they get to joking around a little bit, they hear, "Okay, gentlemen, that's enough joking around. Let's get back to work here." All that stuff is so real. It's fascinating. He talks a lot about the scales and being weighed in, and he wonders why Bob Lazar was not weighed in at S4. Well, the reason I think Dan is being weighed in is because Bob, when he was at S4, smuggled a little camera in, one of those little 110 things you used to get at the drugstore. And
I think it was Burger King, wasn't it?
yeah, and Burger King, and he there was no weighing at that time. They just walked onto the property, you know, and then did their work. And Bob put this little camera in the bottom of a chair. He extruded the aluminum portion and put it up in there, and then he was going to take a picture and bring it out. And of course, he never got it out. But he never brought the camera out because he didn't take any pictures. But after he left, somebody found that camera, and I'm pretty sure that's when all the restrictions started.